Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, a nature and wildlife photographer based in Northern California, coming to you weekly with tips and tricks and experiences from the field. Today we're going to be talking about setting up your autofocus custom buttons and how I've set them up to maximize my chances of getting the shot in the field. I'll be walking through the autofocus button setup I have on my Sony a1 Mark II, but this setup will probably work for you on a Nikon or Canon system as well. So let's get into it. When it comes to autofocus custom buttons, we're trying to optimize for three different things. We want to be able to switch rapidly between different subjects in the field. We want to be able to change the autofocus zones as quickly as possible. And we need to be able to override the autofocus system so that if the camera fails, we can quickly take charge and tell it what we want it to do. First, let's tackle changing subjects quickly in the field. In this scenario, we are photographing an animal and we see a bird and we want to rapidly be able to switch subjects. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to change this button here, which is the autofocus joystick, so that not only can that joystick button move the point around the frame, but we can also push it and have it switch between different subjects. The way that we do that is we're going to go into menu and we're going to go to custom buttons here. And we're going to go to Operation Customize. We're going to switch to Custom Key Dial Set. And we're going to find that button. And that button is located on the second row down. So second row down here, which gives us the rear two visualization. And it's the first button on that list. And we're going to assign that to Recognition Target Select. Now, when we select that, it actually brings up this menu. And in this menu, we can select which subjects we want to toggle through when we push a button. So I have it set personally to human, animal, bird, bird, and animal, and then insect. That's what I photograph the most. If you only photograph birds, or if you only photograph, well, then there'd be no point. But if you only photograph animals and birds, you might only select those two. But in my case, I'm also photographing insects and humans. So we've assigned this button to toggle through, and now we can toggle through the different modes. So next we're going to be tackling rapidly changing autofocus areas in the field. For example, going from a wide area autofocus to a single point very quickly with one button. Now this is the kind of scenario that you might be dealing with if you're photographing the same subject, but that subject might be in the sky or in the brush. We want very different autofocus settings for those two scenarios. So to do this, we're just going to map to a single button an ability to switch between different autofocus areas. And to make this simple further, we can take the extra step again to limit the autofocus areas that we're considering. So what we're going to do is we're going to set C2, this button right here, to cycle through the different autofocus areas that I want it to cycle through when I'm looking through the viewfinder. Now to do that, we're going to go into menu and we're going to go down to the same area we went to before, which is Operation Customize, where they're going to go to Custom Key. And here we're going to be going down to the third option. You can see on the right side here, 1, 2, 3, which is the top. And we have two buttons on the top. So here what I'm going to do is look at button 2, which is the one we were just talking about. And we're going to configure that to switch focus area. So that's going to just cycle through. Switch here means cycle. So it's going to cycle through the autofocus areas that we have selected. Now, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So you can see here, I'm pushing the button. Mine goes from wide to zone to single spot to spot extra small to custom zone, which is a little bit smaller than the standard zone, which is this one. Now you'll notice there are a lot of other autofocus modes that I'm not cycling through here. So how do we do that part? Well, of course, if we have fewer modes to cycle through, then it takes less time to go through all of the autofocus modes that we have, which is a good thing when you're in the field and you want to cycle through them. So the way that we can limit the number of focus areas that we're cycling through is to go in here. So we're going to autofocus, manual focus menu, focus area, and that's this option here, focus area limit, which is actually pretty well named. Now you have a ton of options here. The bottom ones, the bottom two rows are all tracking versions. and the top two rows are all non-tracking versions of the same things. So what I have here is a wide zone, and then the area of spot medium, which I find is kind of a nice medium. And then I do have spot extra small, and I would encourage you to select that because of the next thing that we're going to get into. And then we have custom autofocus area, which is the somewhat smaller zone that I talked about. So those are the only ones I've selected, which is why when I push this button, we can cycle through those really quickly. Finally, even the newest cameras sometimes fail, and the Sony a1 Mark II is no exception. Sometimes it focuses on stuff I don't want it to, or the nearest subject in the frame. And in those scenarios, I need a way to override the autofocus system so that I can tell it exactly where the subject is and where I want it to focus. My preferred approach here is to still use autofocus, but tell it exactly where I want it to focus using an extra small spot point. The other way to do this is to use manual focus and activate DMF, which I'll let you Google if you want to learn about that, which will allow you to use the manual focus ring on your lens so that you can adjust focus based on that. But here I'm going to talk about the autofocus method. So more specifically, what we want to do here is assign the auto exposure lock button, the second back button that we have here, to a specific autofocus mode. And we want it to be a spot extra small, the smallest possible point that we can select in the autofocus system. And I want to be able to just push that button and know that the camera is going to use that setting. It's not going to track, it's going to just specifically do point autofocus with that point. Now to do this, it's a little complicated, so bear with me. I'm going to walk through all of the steps for you. But in aggregate, what we're going to do is we're going to assign that extra small autofocus setting to a specific mode within the camera, a recall function that it will remember. And then we're going to map that recall function to a specific button. It's a two-step process, and let's walk through it. The way we set that up is to register that as a specific autofocus mode. Now here, what we're going to do is we're going to go in here, which is the same menu we just were in last time. We go to autofocus, manual focus, focus area, and then we're going to select AF area registration, and we're going to turn that on. We're going to temporarily have this on so that we can tell the camera to remember a specific autofocus setting. So we switch that on, and it gives us this message, which is telling me that if I hold down this button here, which is the function button, it will assign whatever mode I'm in to that remembered, memorized setting. So here, I'm in zone autofocus. If I were to hold down the function button, it will assign zone autofocus to my memorized setting. You see, registered as the area, I'm in zone. So now when I push that second button, it's staying in zone, right? But if I cycle through here and I go to extra small and I memorize that, registered as autofocus area, even though I'm in a custom autofocus area here, or say we're in zone again as the standard, I switch that using, you'll recall, this button right here, this custom 2. Now if I push autofocus, the second button, AEL, it's now going back to that single point that I want it to go to. So what we're going to do here to program that AEL button, we're going to switch that AF area registration back off. We can do that because we don't want it to accidentally, if we hold down FN for some reason, memorize a new autofocus area. But if we needed to reassign the memorized autofocus area, we would do that by switching that back on. Now here what we do is we go over back into that custom button setting that we were in before. We go to Operation Customize, Custom Key and Dial Set. And here we're going to switch the second button. It's actually the first possible thing we can customize, the AEL button, number 1 right here. And we're going to switch that to registered area, the thing we memorized, plus AF on. What that's going to do is it's not just going to go into that. If we were in toggle or hold for the registered area, it would show, but it wouldn't be automatically autofocusing. So we'd go into that mode in effect, but we wouldn't be focusing on anything. So we need another finger in order to tell it to autofocus. So to get around that, what we do is we set that area not just to switching into that mode when we push it, but we want to also activate autofocus. Now, if you have set AF on subject detection, if you have autofocus subject detection on, it's still going to activate autofocus subject detection within that little tiny box. If for some reason you don't want it to do that, you need to shut off autofocus subject detection so you can truly just get a single point. The way to do that is to do one more assignment. We want to assign C1 here to shut off subject detection. So when we push that button, it turns it on and off. You can see right here, if you look right here, it's going to go on and off, because what I'm doing is I'm switching on and off subject detection. So in that situation where AF subject detection is off now, if I push that AEL button again, we are actually getting a single point, just like the old DSLRs did, which is handy if we run into a challenging situation. So to do that, we're just going to do one last thing. We're going to come back into that same menu we're now really good friends with. We're going to go down here to the top again, and we're going to find that first button, and we're going to turn that to recognition off on toggle. So when we push that button, it will toggle on and off subject detection. Well, there you have it. Those are my tips for adjusting the custom autofocus buttons on your camera. This is how I've set up the Sony a1 Mark II. I think these settings will also work on Nikon and Canon, though the details might be a little bit different. But I hope that's helpful for you. Please do not hesitate to comment if you have different settings. I'm curious what you're using in the field, and I welcome your suggestions and feedback on this video. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.